Something bugging you? Come on in. Let's go for a drive. Alisa Childers, thank you for joining me and Rosco today. By the way, this is Rosco.
Rosco. Awesome.
Yes. We're excited to have you with us while you're in town. What a blessing for us.
This is great. It's a beautiful day.
It is a gorgeous day. A little warm and no air conditioner. And so as long as we are moving, it tends to be fine. We'll see how traffic is today. So here's something on my mind that is bugging me. It's often bugging it's bugging me especially when I encounter students that have this particular opinion. I thought you might be someone well-versed and able, capable, yes, to be bugged with me on this, and maybe you'd have some advice. I actually think the first time my wife and I heard this challenge or this statement was when she was in seminary, and a young gal in the class, this was an ethics class at seminary, made the comment, it's about time that our ethic catches up with the culture, because there are so many people that are hurting. And so I hear this coming from students as well, like maybe Christianity has been so abusive, it's been so intolerant in the past, and finally we're catching up to meet people where they are. So I'm wondering what you might have to say about this.
That bugs me.
Yeah.
That bugs me.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so the first thought I would have on that is, like, let's just apply that to another time in history and see how that might play out. Like Christians in the 1st century Roman Empire. So you had abortion, you had infanticide, very common. There's evidence all through the church fathers that there were definite abortions happening. A lot of people don't realize that. Not just infanticide, but chemical abortions and things like that. And it was the Christians who came along and said to culture, no, we're not doing that. In fact, the Christians rescued baby girls and, babies. It was usually, a lot of times it was the baby girls that would be left out to die. And this is one of the reasons that early Christianity was so female heavy, because the Christians were taking in these girls. And so what if the Christians back then would have said, we need our ethic to catch up with culture? That would have, I think a lot of people today maybe would agree that would not have been a good thing.
Right.
And so
if the argument went, these families would be much better off and more comfortable if they allowed their newborn girls to die as they left them out
and it was
for exposure.
Perfectly acceptable culturally. So I think what that leans toward is the idea that morality is not something that is in flux with culture. Like culture can, think about Nazi Germany. Even before the Jewish Holocaust, they euthanized many of their own disabled and elderly people, and in the name of morality. So what if the Christians back then would have said, well, we need our ethic to catch up with that, because actually what the Nazis were doing, they believed was morally good. It wasn't just acceptable. They thought they were doing something morally good. So obviously that can't be the way it is. We can't just view our ethic as something that needs to line up with culture, because a lot of times culture is going to be wrong about that. And
I wonder if the difference, so that makes sense to say we can't change an ethic or morality to meet culture, because what if the culture is bad? In this scenario, though, I think the argument is, but it's been bad, because don't you see people are actually have been hurt, and so therefore it needs to change. Similarly, people were being hurt then in Nazi Germany, and it changed, and in that case it changed for the good. So finally we're changing so that people aren't hurt.
So I would say that, one of the ways I think through this question is we can only know what's good or bad, or hurtful or helpful or harmful, or, all of these kind of moral categories of words. We can only know what's actually helpful or harmful if we know first what is true. And so I use this example sometimes of, I've heard people say things like, when Christians teach that we are sinners and inherently we're sinful, that's actually abusive to tell people that, because that's what abusers do. An abuser will tell you that you're nothing, that you need them to have some worth, and they'll just keep you down. And so therefore the church is doing that when they tell you that you're a sinner. Well, I like to think of the scenario of if you walk into a room and you see somebody just laying on the ground unconscious, and there's another person like beating on their chest, I think everybody would say, yeah, that's abusive. Unless the person who's laying on the floor has just had a heart attack, and the person beating on their chest is trying to save their life with chest compressions, right? And maybe they're clumsy at it. They're beating them, bruising them and stuff. And so what changes it from being helpful or harmful is what's actually true about the diagnosis. And so I think that's one thing we have to bear in mind, because obviously I realize the context of when that's usually being asked has to do with identity, right? It has to be do with the LGBTQ+, where our culture has accepted what you're attracted to, who you're attracted to, what you identify as your actual identity. So whereas the Bible might say this particular behavior is sinful, what people in the culture hear is, you know, that I am inherently unsavable because this is who I am.
Right.
And so I think for Christians, it's going to require us to really untie some of those knots for people to realize that there's not a different message for any group. Everybody has the same message, the same invitation. And it was Jesus' message, was just repent and believe the gospel. We just happen to be at a time in our culture where culture has accepted something that the Bible calls sinful as an actual identity that's fixed and can't be changed. Whereas the message of Christianity to everyone, no matter what your past looks like, is that we have to lay our lives down, and we all have to lay our sexual lives down, all of us do, and follow Jesus and pick up our cross and follow him, which is an unpopular message in a culture that has largely abandoned the idea that humans are sinful. And if you think humans are inherently good, then I can see why somebody might say, well, you know, dig down inside yourself, identify your deepest desires, because the assumption is that what you're going to find is something that's good, and live that out as your identity. Whereas Christianity is the radical opposite. It says that when you do that introspection, you're probably going to find some desires that are in contradiction with what is objectively good, and so that needs to be reoriented. It needs to be changed. And it's strange to be in a culture that would tell you in so many ways, like, you don't need to change. You just need to live out what you find in there. But that's the radical opposite message of the gospel. Which is always contradictory.
It really is. So in this classroom scenario, my wife actually raised her hand and said, I wonder how much, and she just posed it as a question, I wonder how much harm is being done because the culture is not accepting the Christian ethic. Yes. And that's hard to see, and I think it comes back down to, well, is Christianity true? Because if it is, then we might want to align ourselves with reality, or we will run into reality in ways that will be harmful even when we perceive it otherwise.
Because there is genuine abuse.
Sure.
A lot of people have experienced that in the church, but we have to know what's true to know what's actually abusive. If there's a bully pastor who's abusing his position of power to control and manipulate people, then that is abuse. And Jesus stands against that, and the Bible does too. But the interesting thing in our culture today is that they've redefined not all instances of abuse, but even saying that what historically Christianity teaches is abusive. And that's a tough challenge, because that's different than saying, okay, you know, maybe somebody had an experience where there was genuine abuse from a pastor, versus the pastor saying, hey, you're a sinner, and here's the gospel, and inviting you to repent.
That's a different sort of thing. Okay. Well, that was great. Thank you for helping me think through that. I really appreciate it. Where can our viewers find out more about you and the kinds of things you talk about, like progressive Christianity?
Well, they can go to my website. That's alisachilders.com. I also have a podcast, the Alisa Childers Podcast. Pretty creative. And it's on YouTube as well. And got a couple of books out, so you can all find out that.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. It was fun.